Hello again. This month we are going to focus on Iowa's corn. And you learned a lot about corn as second graders. So our lesson's going to look a little bit different. We're going to focus more on one use for that corn, but I hope you know that there are over 4,000 things that have parts of our corn in them. So I'm going to give a quick review on what I mean when I say parts of corn. And I want to start by reminding you that there are different kinds of corn. So in Iowa, probably the first kind of corn that comes to your mind is sweet corn. This is the kind you eat in the summer. You call it corn on the cob. But after summer, we have to preserve it. So you either freeze it and you can buy it in the freezer, or you might can it and buy it this way. But sweet corn is the kind you think of first because it's the kind you eat and it's delicious. But in Iowa, this is not the kind we have the most of. The next kind we grow in Iowa is popcorn. Not our number one either, but as you look at this, these kernels are pretty small, and inside those kernels there is moisture, so there's water. And when you heat the kernels, that moisture turns into steam, and when there's nowhere else for that to go, your kernel pops. It explodes and that steam pops, and that's where you get your popcorn. So we do grow some popcorn in Iowa, but it's not the one we'll talk about today. Next, you see this around fall. Okay, you start to see this used mostly as decoration. And a lot of us call this Indian corn, but its scientific name is flint corn. This is not our number one crop. Most of it is grown for decoration, although you can eat this. All right, the kind Iowa is known for, we grow more of this than any other state, is field corn, or it's sometimes called dent corn. And if you look at the kernels, you can see there is a dent. So as these dry out, they lose their moisture and they get a dent that forms. These kernels are really hard. Livestock eats about 1/3 of the corn, the field corn that grows in Iowa, and we grind this into cornmeal for them to eat, or especially for cattle, we chop this into silage before the plant dies. So when it's still green, August, September, we use a chopper and chop the whole stalk and turn it into silage. But a lot of this is grown for people to use too, and we use it in different ways. Each of these little kernels has 4 different parts when they're processed, so when they're broken down. Each one has fiber, protein, starch, and oil. Now, the oil and the starch are what we're going to focus on a little bit today. So, one of the things that Iowa is also producing a lot of is called ethanol. Ethanol is fuel for your car that is made from the sugar that is in field corn. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And as you're learning about biofuels, I hope you have this page. What we're going to do today is get some background information on biofuel, so ethanol as well as biodiesel that's made from soybean oil. We're going to get some background information on what those are and how they're used and how they're made. And then my hope is that you will use this graphic organizer to write about the things you learn. So you might be given instructions to write an explanation paragraph explaining how we use these or explaining how they're made. You might be asked to write a persuasion paragraph, so persuading a person or a company to use biofuels. This will make more sense to you after you learn a little more, but hopefully you have this page. We're going to go through kind of a PowerPoint here and learn a little bit more about biofuels, and then we'll come back to this when we're done. We are going to talk about biofuels. There are 2 main biofuels that are produced, and Iowa happens to be the largest producer of one of them. So we're going to talk about why those are beneficial or why they are a good thing, and then we'll look a little bit at what Iowa has to do with that. Okay, there are a few vocabulary words or terms that we are going to use. And if you have the graphic organizer that you saw me holding up, these are at the top of your page as well. So the first one is biofuel. So any fuel that is made of biological raw material that is renewable. That is a lot of big words, and we're going to talk about that. So I don't want that vocabulary term to freak you out. I promise you will understand this before we are finished. If we look at the next one, the next word is ethanol. Now, ethanol is a kind of fuel for your car, but instead of being made from traditional resources, which in this case is petroleum, so oil, instead of just using petroleum oil, we can blend some corn, okay, so the alcohol from corn, we can blend some of that into our gas and make a cleaner or a different biofuel. The next word is biodiesel. So some bigger vehicles like semis and school buses and tractors, even bigger trucks require diesel. Now, just like using traditional gas, using traditional diesel is a little more problematic for the environment, and we'll look at that in a second. So biodiesel is a renewable fuel similar to diesel, but it is derived or made from vegetable sources. The last word there, the last term, is renewable energy. Renewable energy is from a source that is not depleted or it's not gone when it's used. So things like wind and solar power aren't gone. We know that we're going to have more wind, and as long as the sun is shining, we have enough solar power. Okay, let's break some of those terms down. So, what is a renewable resource? And hopefully, as fourth graders, this isn't brand new to you, so this might be a review. But if something is renewable, the dictionary says it is capable of being replaced by natural ecological cycles or sound management practices. So what that means, if you look at the left side where it says natural ecological cycles in green, that means these are things that can be replaced naturally. So people don't have to do anything to replace these things. Earth takes care of it, okay? So water, we continue to have rainfall, so water can be replenished. In the middle, you see a wind turbine. Like I said, wind isn't something we create. And then sunshine, if something is solar powered. On the right, other renewable resources are things that people can continue to grow. So management means you take care of something. So if we have sound management, we are taking good care of something. And on the right, you see corn and soybeans. Now, those are what we're talking about and what Iowa produces, the renewable resources we produce. But there are others. Okay, we can make these biofuels from other plants also. So today we're going to focus on those corn and soybeans. So two renewable resources that Iowa's farmers continue to replace by taking good care of the land and planting those crops. Non-renewable resources, if something is non-renewable, it is not able to be renewed or it is unable to be replaced. In these two pictures on the left, you see an image of a coal mine. Okay, people still mine for coal. There are some things that are still coal powered. And on the right, you see an image of an oil drill. Okay, now traditional gas, if you are putting gas in your car and it is not ethanol, it is made from oil like you see on the right side. That can't be replaced though. So if we run out of that on Earth, we don't have another option. We have to figure out another way that we can create fuel for our cars and for other things without relying only on that oil that we can't replace. Okay, biofuels also are cleaner for the air. So when we talk about biofuel, remember that's ethanol we make from corn or biodiesel we make from soybeans. Petroleum-based fuels. So petroleum is oil. So that oil we just talked about that we would use to make gas in the past before we had the technology to make ethanol. Older fuels or fuels that don't have corn in them don't burn very clean into the air. Okay, you're breathing that in. That air is trapped next to Earth by our atmosphere. And I'm sure you know that we have some problems. We do have holes in our atmosphere. And as humans taking care of Earth, we have to make choices that can help repair that. Okay, those choices we're making about what goes in our car and what kinds of things we buy, we have to make those better choices. So, biofuels do not release as much carbon dioxide, and that is the part of gas that is being harmful to Earth's atmosphere. Let's talk about ethanol. Ethanol is made from sugar that's naturally in corn. Corn has 4 different parts, and in a moment we will look at that. It is 35% oxygen. Okay, that's what you're breathing in. We know that's good. So if it's made up of more oxygen, it's going to be cleaner when it goes from your car into the air. The next point says E85 is the cleanest burning fuel available to people. Not all cars can use E85. That's different than ethanol that your family might put into your car. Only some cars can use E85. They are making more cars that can use that, but it is the cleanest burning fuel that any person can use, and it's made from corn. Another plus is that ethanol usually costs less than petroleum-based gas. Okay, on the right, you can see an image that shows a little bit of how ethanol is made, and there is a lot of science and a lot of chemistry involved in making ethanol. But this picture is kind of a simple picture to show you. If you start on the bottom left, start right here with those corn kernels, okay? They are ground into cornmeal. Then they are mashed and heated so that that sugar comes out. They are fermented and mixed with yeast. And then they get distilled, and that alcohol is what gets turned into ethanol. Okay, Iowa produces more ethanol than any other state in the United States. We have 43 ethanol plants in Iowa, so almost half of the counties in Iowa have one. And Iowa produces about 4.5 billion gallons of ethanol each year. Okay, on the next picture, you see a picture of cattle. What do they have to do with ethanol? Well, when ethanol is produced or when it is made, there's a byproduct. So that means something else is made through that process. Ethanol is made from the starch that's in corn, but corn has 4 parts. There's starch, oil, protein, and fiber. So if we only need the starch, that means we're going to have 3 parts left over. Instead of wasting that, the leftover is made into what's called distiller's grains, and we can feed that to livestock. A lot of cattle, pigs, and then chickens and turkeys also eat distiller's grains. So when a farmer sends their corn and sells it to an ethanol plant, if that same farmer has livestock, they get back what's left over from their corn and they feed it to their livestock. Okay, so no part of that plant is wasted. Just like in other things we will talk about this year with livestock, we don't waste any part of a plant or animal when we harvest it and use it. So you see those cattle in a feedlot, part of their diet is distiller's grains. And on the right, that picture was taken on the same farm. That's a pile of distiller's grains that the farmer had gotten back from the ethanol plant in Marcus, Iowa, actually. Biodiesel is really similar to ethanol. It's another biofuel, but average cars, like the car I drive, the car your family drives, probably does not take diesel. Trucks do, buses, tractors, some pickups, and instead of using regular diesel, they can use biodiesel. That can be made from different plants, but in Iowa we use soybean oil. So remember that those soybeans have oil and then soybean meal. We don't have as many biodiesel refineries or factories in Iowa, but we have 11 of them. And Iowa makes about 40 million gallons of biodiesel. So that's kind of a quick overview of the different biofuels that we're making in Iowa and what our farmers have to do with that. Okay, I'm hoping after that you have a little better understanding of what we mean when I say biofuels. So, biofuels are ethanol, biodiesel, and those fuels that we can make using the sugars and the oil from our crops and our plants instead of using those non-renewable resources. I want to remind you something you saw in second grade. In second grade, we did a little experiment with some packing peanuts. And you've already seen this, so I'm not going to do the science experiment side, but I am going to show this to you again. This packing peanut is made of styrofoam that was made from petroleum. So the same oil that's used to make regular gas. This was made using cornstarch. Now we talked about corn is biodegradable, so ethanol burns cleaner in our air. And I want to show you what I mean when we say that. I'll show you this again. So I've got my 2 cups with water, room temperature water, nothing fancy. I'm going to push this down. When I put these 2 packing peanuts in, you'll remember that they act very differently in water. This one is made of petroleum. So it's styrofoam, it's not going to break down. But as I look at this one made of cornstarch, hopefully you remember that this will break down. Just like corn breaks down in soil and water because it's biodegradable, this will do the same thing. So let's give it a second here to soak up and absorb that water. Okay, but if you remember this already, you can see, it's hard to see on the computer, but this packing peanut made of corn is already dissolving. So it would do the same thing in air when we talk about it burning from our car. This one, made of petroleum, is just sitting there, okay? It's toxic, it's creating pollution. This one, kind of like our ethanol, when it's made from corn, is dissolving into the air, and it's corn, that renewable natural resource that's not going to be as problematic or create as much pollution, okay? So if we go back to our writing here, you're going to start by listing your opinion. It does not have to be like mine. But my opinion is that we should encourage more people to use biofuels. So I'm always trying to teach people about ethanol and about biodiesel, hoping that more people will make that choice. If I want to persuade them, I need some reasons to support my opinion. So I have 3 reasons listed. I said 1, biofuels burn cleaner, keeping our environment cleaner and healthier. That's one reason I have that opinion. 2 is that biofuels are not as expensive as traditional fuel. It does not cost as much to produce corn as it does to drill oil. So that end product does not cost as much. If I'm going to put gas in my car, I'm going to make a choice to spend less money. I always put ethanol in my car. My 3rd reason says biofuels are made from renewable resources. So I know that petroleum is not renewable, but corn is. We have those management practices to continue growing healthy crops. In conclusion, I would say that biofuels are cleaner, renewable, and a more cost-effective choice. So if your teacher has instructions for you to turn this into a paragraph, they're going to give you those reasons. But my hope today is that you learned that this corn is for a lot more than feeding cattle and pigs and chickens, and we can use it for things other than just food for people. Our biofuels are a huge resource. Iowa produces more ethanol than any other state, and I'm hoping that you will encourage others to start making that choice for our environment also.